Welcome, everybody tuning in to listen. It is the first ever Blues Rants podcast. I am your host, Philip Miller. Very good to have you all with us. We got a lot of hockey to talk about here tonight. Today, we will talk about 3-1 loss against Arizona, rounding out the year of 2019. Happy New Year to all of our listeners. We will tee up the game against Colorado, talk a bit about the World Juniors, wrap up the first half of the season, and a little bit of sound bites later on from Columbus head coach John Tortorella. Some of you may have heard that. And JB versus JB. We'll get to all of that later on. This will start about the 3-1 loss against the Arizona Coyotes on New Year's Eve. Tyler Bozak with the only goal from Steen and Thomas. Phil Kessel capitalizing on a rare poor turnover from both Justin Falk and Alex Pietrangelo. This game, I was able to watch the majority of it, not quite all of it, but this game seemed interesting to me for a few reasons. One, because the Blues really didn't have a whole lot going for them, not for lack of trying, but just because Arizona was just stifling them. They really stifled their possession time. We know so well about how the Blues style of play all originates from how they just take the time to establish themselves in their offensive zone. They create just mounting pressure, and they just wear teams down by keeping it in the O-zone. And they weren't able to do a lot of that. Credit to Arizona and defense. They were just, even with the zone entries, they weren't able to get any established possession time. And we know that St. Louis is not much of a rush team at this time. Also, of course, you had defensive turnovers. Like I mentioned, Phil Kessel goal. It looked like it was supposed to be getting cleared out. Jaden Schwartz tries to chip the puck away, can't get it out, gets kept in at the blue line. And Phil Kessel, I mean, it's a matter of half a second, but just like that, breaks both Pietrangelo and Falk straight down the middle, manages to quickly catch one on Jake Allen. One of Jake Allen's rare road losses. We know he's been an absolute dominant road warrior on the road. And then, of course, you've got Nick Schmaltz burying the empty netter at the end of that game. On the power play, which is another factor, power play, big donut. After quite a few attempts, it got nasty there. I'm kind of liking these games against Arizona. You know, obviously they've busted both of St. Louis's point streaks. They snapped a 7-game winning streak back in November in the shootout, and they've snapped the 8-game winning streak here with this loss. Another reason I find this Arizona game to be really interesting, not just now, but in the immediate future and the distant future. When's the last time we talked about Arizona? Genuinely. For a time there, it almost sounded like Arizona might actually be moving. There was a lot of rumors about, well, is the owner going to sell the team? Are they going to move somewhere? They did basically move from Phoenix to Glendale, thus turning into the Arizona Coyotes. But for many seasons there, they were bottom dollar for goals for and against, usually last place or close to in the NHL Pacific. Just recently, they've been back on the uptick. Darcy Kemper has been lights out for them. They've got Phil Kessel over there who scored. They've got the Taylor Hall acquisition, which will probably, looks like, take some time, but so far he's showing promise for them. We can probably talk about the Taylor Hall acquisition and how the Blues didn't get him at another time. But Arizona, all of a sudden, they've got a whole lot of stuff going for them. I'm thinking they want to get that cup now with that Taylor Hall acquisition, or at least get into the playoffs. I mean, that's it. I mean, it's exciting. It's exciting for the fan base to actually finally see these teams back in the playoffs. Everybody wants Edmonton back in the playoffs because we want to see Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl in the playoffs, and we're in desperate worry about the fact that might not ever happen. So to see the Arizona Coyotes actually doing well makes it really interesting. And not just for this year. And I say this year because if they were to make it into the playoffs, the Pacific Division as it stands right now, not the craziest race. You've got Vegas out in the lead right now with 50, Arizona with 48, Edmonton with 46, currently sitting in that last wild card spot, if I have that correct. And after that, really, it's kind of open season, so you could see Arizona keep consistent and take the division, or you could see them fall out of the playoff spot like that. You have 5 points separating Calgary, Vancouver, Edmonton, Arizona, Vegas, Winnipeg, Dallas, Colorado. The wild card spots and pretty much the entire Pacific Division is practically up for grabs now as we head into 2020. But to go back to that point, if you think right now about the Blues, which they have 8-point lead over anybody in the Western Conference, they've clearly been the best of the West, but that would lead them to facing the lowest tiered wildcard spot. If Arizona ends up being that bottom wildcard spot by the end of the season, you never know. That'd be your first round against St. Louis, and Arizona has been kind of a thorn in St. Louis's side, no matter how good or bad they were playing this past calendar year. I'm pretty sure they took one of the final games of the season series last season when the Blues were finally turning things around at the start of 2019. Obviously, they've gone 2 for 2 against us here. Blues are now 1-0-1 or 0-1-1, beg your pardon, against Arizona. And for another reason, y'all have to remember, we're going to start seeing them more. Arizona will be moving to the Central Division once Seattle gets into the picture. So it's the Seattle, insert name here because we still don't know, will take over Arizona's spot, and Arizona will get transferred over to the Central Division. Of course, you see way more Central Division opponents. Tonight's game in Colorado is already the third matchup, and you could really see some sort of rivalry brewing there last night, or on New Year's Eve, excuse me. I would love to see if something generates here. I really do. And, Darcy Kemper, we saw him a lot in Minnesota. Wasn't able to have anything really break out, and he comes over to Arizona, and all of a sudden he's the best goaltender in the league. Just got his first ever All-Star call-up, which was great for him. He sounds very excited for that. All in all, decent effort by the Blues. Some games I think bounces just don't go your way. I think Arizona just played a very thorough 60 minutes, and the Blues just weren't able to match that, in all honesty. And it was close, not for lack of trying. It was close, obviously 1-1 up until that third period there. Special teams, again, really played a part. They scored 2 power play goals, if you want to be technical, even though one was on the empty net. But should be interesting stuff to watch as we go forward on into 2020, second half of the season. Before we get to the first half of the season, we'll tee up tonight's game against Colorado. I'm stuck on Arizona. Colorado Avalanche, currently in second in the division, as I mentioned earlier. They have 50 points. Looking at a not very good last set of games, 1-4-1 in their last 6. They're running a 3-game losing streak. They're really trying to look for something to spark them up right now. And this will be a really fun one because, as I said, the Blues have already taken 2 of the 5 matchups this season against Colorado. And the Avs are, for the most part, finally all healthy. I think we knew at the beginning of the season they were going to be a wagon. They landed Andrei Burakovsky. They grabbed Nazem Kadri in exchange for Tyson Barrie. Obviously, Nathan MacKinnon is he's inhuman. He's right up there with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl over in Edmonton. Captain Gabriel Landeskog shows no signs of slowing down. Scored a filthy goal earlier this week. Obviously, I don't like to use the word benchmark game much for anything like this, but this is definitely a team you'll most likely see in the playoffs. They're going to be hungry, as always. They've had a long, arduous rebuild. They are third overall in the league in goals for, 10th in goals against. They've got real high chances of going even farther than they did last year after that unfortunate end to San Jose. And don't think you've seen the last of Colorado, not just this season, but into next season and the next. Players to look for, I'd have to say, you really want your depth guys to step up at all times, and obviously they really have. It's hard to believe that we've gone pretty much the majority of this season without Vladimir Tarasenko. He only played the first 10 games. But in terms of having the depth step up, I see that I believe Zach Sanford is going to be returning to the lineup tonight. Berube's obviously looking for a little bit more of a shuffle. Jordan Kyrou has been scratched for tonight's game. He really didn't have that great of a game against Arizona, which is why I think he got shuffled down towards the bottom lines there later on in the game. But, Sanford, he was saying just keep playing physical, keep playing hard. I think he's definitely going to be excited to get back in the lineup. He's been healthy scratch for a few games, but the Blues are going to need him. The Blues are definitely going to need him. He's got a bit of a tendency to only show up for maybe 1 or 2 games, in my frank, candid opinion, and not too much somewhere else. But first time it'll be in Denver, first time against the home crowd. Going to be a fun one for sure. Looking forward to all that and more. Moving on here, we'll look quickly into the World Juniors, the standings as they go right now. Finally in elimination games, and Team USA gets eliminated. 1-0 contest, a gold medal rematch against Finland. Scoreless through 2 periods up until about the 5-minute mark. Again, special teams actually played a part in that. US could not capitalize on their power plays. Finland able to capitalize on one for the only goal of the game. U.S. is out in the quarterfinals. Finland, I believe, plays Sweden, if I have that correct. Canada will play Team Russia. Those games will all be on Saturday, one at 9/8 Central, one at noon Central Time on Saturday. Joel Hofer really showed up for the Team Canada. Blues prospect Joel Hofer in the 6-1 rout of Slovakia today in the quarterfinal. Canada made 17 saves on 18 shots, I beg your pardon. And he honestly wasn't challenged too hard. Canada came out with a 3-0 lead after the first period and really never looked back afterwards. It'll be interesting to see how the Finland and Sweden game goes. Obviously, Finland, the reigning champions. Sweden, undefeated through 52 straight group play wins. Now, obviously, that actual tournament has proven to be pretty challenging for them, but 52 straight wins in group play, that is an unreal stat. Hard to believe that ever gets touched again. But we'll see how they actually fare in regular tournament play. So, move on here. By the way, you heard of this David Perron guy? He's pretty good at hockey. Mr. Overtime, as he sometimes has been dubbed, after getting that 6th game-winning goal, 4th overtime winner, and he's not in the All-Star game. Obviously, one of the bigger snubs that a lot of people are paying attention to. Matt Barzal is up there. TJ Oshie, also another noticeable snub, former Blue. But there is still hope for them. You can go to nhl.com/vote and vote for him to get in as the last man in for the All-Star game. Voting ends on January 11th. Get in there and vote for David Perron. He needs your votes. And, I mean, are we looking at the season that this guy is having? 16 goals, 24 assists, 40 points so far, just halfway through the season. He's basically a point-per-game player. He has been absolutely unreal this season. I mean, we're seeing flashes of his time with Vegas back in 2017-18. So now we'll move on. Vote for David Perron. He's a good player. He's a good player. We'll wrap up the first half of the season. Now, kind of difficult to find anything to critique when you are second overall in the league in points. You have a nice 8-point cushion over anybody else in the Western Conference as of right now. You look at Jordan Binnington and Jake Allen. They've been a pretty dynamite tandem, probably one of the best, if not close to there in the league, perhaps behind Tuukka Rask and Yaroslav Halak. Over in Boston, you have David Perron, who, as I mentioned, has just been lights out. Ryan O'Reilly, not a lot of goals, a ton of assists, which is usually what you expect from a two-way forward like him. I know he's looking to improve his game, but he still has been there the whole time. The All-Star bid getting him into the game was actually well-deserved, as was for Alex Pietrangelo and Jordan Binnington. All three of those guys will be at home in St. Louis in the All-Star game. That is on January 24th and 5th. And probably the biggest notable thing about this team has obviously just been the next man up mentality, as so many people have talked about. We've had everyone from Vladimir Tarasenko, Sammy Blais, who will be hopefully back post All-Star break, Steiner, Carl Gunnarsson's been out, Ivan Barbashev went down for a little bit, Oscar Sundqvist was day-to-day for some games. All these players, we've had so many forwards down. The month of November was real tough on the Blues, but for all intents and purposes, they just kept winning like it was no big deal, and guys like Jordan Kyrou have stepped up. Guys have played their roles on the bottom lines, like Troy Brouwer. Good to see him back in a blue jersey after some time away from the NHL. Justin Falk has really, I think he's starting to finally fit in with the club. It took him some time, which I can understand considering you were with one team for 8 years. That's a bit of an adjustment. But also, Justin Falk playing in his 600th game on New Year's Eve against Arizona. Congratulations to Justin Falk on that achievement, 600 games. And everything else so far has been, it's just the buy-in to Craig Berube's mindset of the style of hockey that they play. It's not clean. It's not pretty. It's messy. It is a gritty type of game. They grind you down, but they get the job done. And that's obviously been the most important part. We look at goals for, which is not great, 14th of 31 teams. Goals against is very good, top 5 in the league. Again, not pretty results, but it's getting the job done. And at the end of the day, a win is a win is a win, as they always say. So first half of the season, been pretty phenomenal. It's really, you don't see too often anymore a really good bid for a Stanley Cup defense, maybe with the exception of Pittsburgh, obviously, or Chicago and LA of the early 2010s. But this group clearly is all in, and it looks like a repeat run could be in the future. I don't want to jinx anything, but you never know. Now, speaking of the 2010s, obviously this decade's come to a close. We are now in the roaring 20s, quote unquote, again. And of course, you've got every media outlet ever doing all decade teams, all decade lines, all decade players, all that stuff. And while some of them are kind of cheesy, I do want to try and do one just for the Blues. Just the 5 lines and just the 6 guys out on the ice and the head coach. Because everybody does the best players of the decade, and okay, kind of an open jump shot. You've got Sidney Crosby, Alex Ovechkin, and Guy, probably Patrick Kane. You've got goaltenders like Carey Price and Henrik Lundqvist that definitely shoot out at the top of the crop for this decade. But if you look at decade players for the Blues, sometimes it can be a more interesting facet because the Blues definitely have multiple franchise players, a lot more than some. And I was trying to make, the 6 guys on the ice and the coach. I think right wing, pretty open jump shot, Vladimir Tarasenko, VT91 on the right wing for that all-decade team. At center, I thought about this one for a bit. I thought about adding a former captain, but I'm going to go with the player with the most points for their team through the past decade, Alexander Steen, with 447 total points. That's pretty darn impressive. I'm not going to lie there. So I thought about going with David Backes. He is at 333. Obviously did not re-sign with the club. He's with Boston now, which is why I'm going with Alex Steen at center. On left wing, now I love my guy David Perron. I really do. I wanted to pick David Perron really badly, but he's been in and out of clubs. He's been with the Blues now for his 3rd individual time. I got to go with Jaden Schwartz on this one. Jaden Schwartz has been the bona fide top left winger ever since he came to St. Louis. 341 total points since the start of 2010. He's my guy on left wing. So up front, you have Schwartz, Steen, and Vladdy. Now on the backside, kind of an open jump shot who your number 1 defenseman is. Alex Pietrangelo, current captain. We really hope he stays the current captain. Contract situations being what they are, he will be an unrestricted free agent at the end of this season. And that was another interesting conversation. Obviously, a lot of us are still kind of perplexed with the Justin Falk trade and the immediate extension, and a hefty one, too. He's now, I think, the longest extended Blue. Braden Shen might have him beat there. But Alex Pietrangelo, still without a contract. Obviously, he has been with the Blues his entire career, his entire illustrious career of 12 years, 729 games so far with the Blues. He's starting to pass Al McInnes on all the records by defensemen. He just beat the all-time assists record a couple of games ago. But still without no contract. The only news I hear, Elliot Friedman has said that Blues are probably looking around $8 million a year. Not entirely sure on the term. Obviously, he's probably a little bit higher than that. The Roman Josi contract comes to mind. 2 very similar players, 2 very similar contracts, and Roman Josi at a cap hit of upper 9, if I do recall correctly. However, and trying to remove bias as much as I can, I think Alex Pietrangelo's ceiling is a bit higher than Roman Josi's. Roman Josi, obviously an elite player, elite defenseman, also the captain of his team, the Nashville Predators. But I think Alex Pietrangelo might just have a little bit more gas in the tank now, as he is very quickly approaching 30. And, obviously, just like with the Braden Shen contract, whatever he re-signs for, it'll probably be a long contract, and it'll probably be a bad contract by the time it ends. But I think if you've got a franchise player like Alex Pietrangelo, again, 12 years with one team. He's been an all-star twice. He's been in the Norris candidacy. He's in the Norris candidacy again. Obviously, he's won the Cup for the Blues, the first guy to touch the Stanley Cup for the Blues. Think about that for a second. I don't know how you don't figure something out and sort out the cap then. But, that's probably something the Blues are not worried about right now. I think they're more worried about, let's go for another cup right now, let the chips fall where they may after postseason, and we work from there. Just saying, I hope you re-sign Pietrangelo, as does pretty much everybody. So, moving on to our next topic, we'll quickly give you a little bit on the Winter Classic, but you guys have been waiting for this. The Jordan Binnington jersey. Yes, we are giving away 2 Jordan Binnington jerseys, one for our Twitter followers, one for our Facebook followers. Thank you to all of those who are following us on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. Yes, we have an Instagram. Yes, we need to work on that a little more. But I have to make this a little bit harder for you. I'm a big fan of the Overdrive podcast over on TSN, if any of you ever watched or listened to it. And they do something called Name That Leaf, because they're in Toronto, where every day of their 5-day show, they give you a hint to a former or current Leafs player. And I want to do the same here. So name that blue. I'm going to give you the first clue to naming a former or current St. Louis Blues player. And the first clue, this player has played at least 10 years in the NHL. That's it. Tune into our next episode to get, obviously, in the next clue. I've got 5 more clues racked up. Hopefully, all things go according to plan with our podcast. That will put us at revealing the final clue against the Rangers on Saturday, January 11th. So be sure to tune into that episode as well for your chance to win one of 2 Jordan Binnington jerseys. All right, moving on to the Winter Classic. Dallas Stars, Nashville Predators. How do you put a game of hockey on ice in literally the hottest state in the country? I don't know. They did it anyway, and it was great. The Dallas Stars putting up 4 unanswered goals on the Nashville Predators after the Predators took a 2-0 lead early in the first period thanks to a gnarly Corey Perry hit. If you haven't seen video, you got to check that one out. Bad elbow. Corey Perry coming out today saying it was very unintentional, quote unquote. He was ejected from that game, skated around very, very little amount of ice time. I think maybe only a few minutes, if I recall correctly. But former Anaheim Duck getting in trouble for that. We'll see if any further punishment comes from that as the days go on. But they use that they turned that into a major power play for Nashville. Nashville scored twice to get a 2-0 lead. It would be not until the end of the second period that Dallas would get on the board. They would proceed to put up 4 goals in under 7 combined minutes to take the win 4-2 at home in the Cotton Bowl. Still can't believe they had a game in Dallas. Whatever technology they got underneath the ice to keep that frozen, I'm just impressed. That's all I'll say. We'll move on. I've got a soundbite for you. Some of you have probably already heard this one, and I'll have to set it up and tee it up with some context for you. Chicago Blackhawks, Columbus Blue Jackets in Columbus. Game is tied, goes to overtime, and with less than 20 seconds to go, Patrick Kane shoots the puck over the glass out of the zone, immediate delay of game penalty. Now I say under 20 seconds because you hear the whistle. If you're looking at the clock, you hear the whistle at approximately 19.2, excuse me. The clock continues moving until 18.1, a whole 1.1 seconds. Doesn't sound like a lot, but John Tortorella protests. The refs kind of turn a blind ear. They don't bring it to Toronto for review. Play goes on. Columbus gets a power play. Zach Werenski blasts a slap shot in the final second. No, wait, no, he didn't. Time ran out. The instant after the puck, the instant before the puck went in. Columbus, Chicago go to the shootout. Patrick Kane scores a dandy of a goal, and they lose their goaltender, Jonas Korpisalo, who has been lights out actually for Columbus. He's actually been pretty solid for Columbus. Gets injured in the shootout. Like, how? You can't but not feel bad for that guy. But all that being said, we know what kind of character John Tortorella is. Here's what he had to say following the shootout loss.
So the whistle blows. The whistle is blown at 19.2 on the clock. For some reason, the clock is run down a second and a tenth to 18.1. For whatever reason, I have no idea. So instead of resetting the clock, we have them tell our captain we're not going to do it. Toronto doesn't step in. Refs don't do their freaking job. And now we lose the game, and we lose our goalie. So the chain of events, if it was done right, we don't lose our goalie, we win the hockey game. So all this technology, right? The technology and getting things right, the stubbornness tonight by the officials and by the league and Toronto, however it's supposed to work, screws us. It's ridiculous. I'm not taking any God.
So, goes without saying, he got a little heated there. And, of course, there were repercussions for it. John Tortorella fined $20,000 by the NHL player's safety for his comments following the loss. He faces another penalty if he does something similar to it by basically the end of the calendar year, another $29,000 fine. He's racked up a decent amount of fines over his NHL career. Obviously one of the best characters in the league. He's explosive, he's dynamic, he's whatever you want to call him. But okay, when are we going to get the NHL right here, right? I mean, you have Oscar Sundqvist get fined a little under $7,400 for taking out John Gibson. And yeah, it was a bad hit. Come on, roll with me. That was a bad hit, and we all know it. And John Tortorella calling out the NHL officials, which I believe they got right. I watched the replay. I watched the whistle. I saw the clock go down 1.1 seconds for reasons. He was right. And he calls out the officials and he gets in trouble for it. Now, of course, yeah, the expletives don't help much, and him trying to avoid saying anything less than that was probably a struggle for him. But this league's going to be so great once they finish building it, man. I don't really have any other thoughts other than that. Now, getting pretty close to game time here. It's 25 minutes to 8:30. Game will probably start shortly after. So we'll start to close out here. One final thing that's been taking over Twitter and all kinds of social media. JB against JB. You probably know one. You're probably not thinking of the other. Jordan Binnington challenging Justin Bieber on Instagram. Justin Bieber at just a little recreational hockey event actually scored a pretty nifty little backhander. Jordan Binnington comments saying, 10 breakaways, me versus you. You score one on me, I'll dye my hair platinum blonde at Justin Bieber. Obviously, the internet kind of breaks a little bit, and Justin Bieber throwing out his response today. How about $10,000 to charity I score, and you donate to a charity of my choice, and we film it, he said in a separate Instagram post. That's just funny. I would love to see that. It's fully silly. I'm sure something like that would probably happen at the All-Star game. Um, Obviously, Justin Bieber's a big Toronto Maple Leafs fan. A lot of Maple Leafs Twitter and fandom know of him being a huge Leafs fan. Uh, you gotta laugh. I would love to see it. JB versus JB. I wish you luck. I wish you luck scoring on, the Stanley Cup champion who really has shown no signs of slowing down, but go ahead. You never know what could happen. So that'll probably be it for us. Next episode we are coming out with will be Saturday, right before the Golden Knights game, 2 p.m. Central Time, an hour before puck drop. We'll get you more topics on all that kind of stuff. Now, before we close, I do like to do one other final thing. This is something that I've stolen, if you will, from the 31 Thoughts podcast. Jeff Merrick over there loves putting up local music of different Canadian bands after the podcast ends. I would like to kind of do the same thing. So, if anybody knows any local St. Louis bands, any music groups of any kind, try and keep it PG. Sorry for all my death metal heads out there. I feel for you. If anybody has any sort of groups they would like to send in music to play as a little outro card, we would love to have it. I think that'd be super fun. But I will leave you all for the first inaugural episode of the podcast. Let us know what you think. Let us know if you like it. Let us know if you don't. Let us know if you prefer live stream or just listening to it afterwards. All of our replays will be put on the SoundCloud for the Blues Rants podcast, which